The morning sun filtered through the high glass panels of the Jefferson County Courthouse, illuminating motes of dust that hung in the still air. The courtroom was tense, the way it often was when Officer Daniel Rourke was scheduled to testify. Known among his peers as a bulldog in uniform, Rourke was a veteran cop, tall, broad-shouldered, his jaw perpetually set as if carved from stone. His voice carried a gruff authority that brooked no nonsense. His attitude often walked a thin line between confidence and arrogance. He believed in law and order in the badge he wore, but lately, that belief had hardened into something colder, a conviction that the system was soft and too forgiving. That morning, Rourke stood beside the prosecutor's table, flipping through his notes while keeping one eye on the gallery. It was full reporters, law students, and local citizens drawn by curiosity. The case was routine. A misdemeanor assault involving a young man Rourke had arrested a month ago. But the atmosphere was charged, as if the walls themselves could sense that something beyond the ordinary was about to happen. Across the aisle, sitting quietly in the back row, was Dr. Maya Carter. She wore a crisp navy suit, her posture composed but commanding. She wasn't there as a defendant, a lawyer, or a witness. She was observing, evaluating, taking in the room. Few knew her name yet. Fewer still knew her new position. She had been appointed as the incoming chief of police for the city. Her appointment scheduled to be announced the following morning. For now, she was incognito, assessing the culture she was about to lead. Maya's eyes followed the courtroom proceedings with a calm, analytical gaze. She had spent years studying systemic reform, policing culture, and community trust. Her doctoral work had focused on de-escalation psychology. She'd served in 3 different cities, earning a reputation for balancing compassion with command. To her, leadership wasn't about dominance, but responsibility. Yet as she watched Rourke's demeanor, the way he glared at the defendant, the stiffness of his posture, she sensed an undercurrent of resentment, a kind of frustration that went deeper than the case at hand. Judge Ellison entered, and the court rose. "You may be seated," he said in his gravelly tone. The proceedings began with routine formalities: testimony, cross-examination, procedural motions. Rourke took the stand, recounting the events of the arrest. His version was confident, detailed, but edged with irritation. "The suspect resisted arrest," Rourke said. "I used minimal force necessary to ensure compliance." The defense attorney, a young man barely out of law school, raised an eyebrow. "Minimal force? My client suffered a dislocated shoulder." Rourke's voice grew sharp. "That happened when he tried to run. You think officers have time to debate physics when someone's bolting for the door?" The judge cleared his throat in warning, but Rourke barely noticed. The tension in the room thickened. Maya Carter leaned forward slightly, noting his body language, the rise in his voice, the telltale flush that crept up his neck. When the testimony ended, Judge Ellison called for a brief recess. People stood, stretched, and chatted in hushed tones. Rourke stepped away from the witness stand, jaw tight, as if the defense's questions had personally insulted him. That's when it happened. As the courtroom buzzed, a woman from the audience, one of the defendant's relatives, stood up and muttered something under her breath. "Cops like you ruin this city," she said softly, but Rourke heard her. His head snapped around. "What was that?" he barked. The woman froze, startled, but Rourke was already advancing. "You got something to say about how I do my job?" Maya rose from her seat immediately, stepping forward. "Officer, that's enough," she said in a calm but firm tone. She wasn't in uniform, but her voice carried authority. Rourke turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "Who are you to tell me what's enough?" "Someone reminding you that you're still in a courtroom," she replied evenly. "Step back." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Rourke was seething, his chest rising and falling in visible agitation. Something in her tone, calm, composed, utterly unafraid, irritated him further. To him, it sounded patronizing, disrespectful even. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job," he snapped, stepping closer. "This woman, Officer Rourke." Judge Ellison's voice cracked like a whip, but it was too late. In one swift, furious motion born of pride and misjudgment, Rourke lifted his hand and slapped Maya across the face. The sound was sharp, echoing in the stunned silence that followed. For a moment, the entire courtroom froze. The bailiff stood motionless. The judge's gavel hovered midair, and the audience gasped in disbelief. Maya staggered slightly but did not fall. Her hand went to her cheek, and she straightened slowly, meeting Rourke's shocked eyes with calm that cut deeper than any shout. "What have you done?" The judge thundered, rising from the bench. Rourke blinked, realization crashing over him like a wave. She provoked me," he stammered. But even as he said it, he knew it sounded hollow. "Officer Rourke, you are hereby held in contempt," Judge Ellison roared. "Bailiff, take his weapon and badge. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending review." The bailiff moved swiftly, confiscating Rourke's service pistol and badge. The murmurs in the courtroom grew into a swell of noise, shock, outrage, disbelief. Maya remained silent, her face a mask of professionalism, though her eyes glistened faintly from the sting. Rourke stood frozen, his hands still half raised, realizing the enormity of what he'd just done. He hadn't just lost his temper, he'd crossed a line that could end his career. His mouth went dry as he tried to form an apology, but no words came. He looked at Maya, her composed figure standing tall despite what had just happened, and something inside him shifted. He had acted not as a protector of justice, but as its violator. The judge ordered a recess, and court officers ushered the crowd out. Rourke was led to a small holding room adjacent to the courtroom. The metallic clink of the door closing behind him was the sound of his pride collapsing. His mind replayed the moment over and over, the slap, the silence, the look in her eyes. He rubbed his face in his hands, muttering under his breath, "What the hell did I just do?" In the main courtroom, Maya stood quietly as the paramedic offered to check her. She declined. "I'm fine," she said softly. Her tone was steady, but beneath it was a storm of emotions, anger, disappointment, sadness. Not for herself, but for what it revealed about the department she was about to lead. She had come to observe, to understand the environment she would inherit. Now she had a first-hand example of the rot she needed to address. Captain Morales arrived minutes later, called in by the courthouse security team. He entered, saw Maya, then looked toward the holding room where Rourke sat. "What happened here?" he demanded. Judge Ellison's face was red with fury. "Your officer assaulted a woman in open court." Morales' eyes widened. "Who?" Before the judge could respond, Maya turned to him. "That would be me," she said simply. The captain's jaw dropped. "Dr. Carter?" She held up a hand. "We'll discuss it later, Captain. For now, I want Officer Rourke processed according to procedure. No favoritism, no shortcuts." Morales nodded, still reeling. He had heard rumors that Maya Carter had been selected as the city's next chief of police, but the announcement wasn't due until morning. And now, one of his own officers had struck her in front of a courtroom full of witnesses, as the day drew to a close. The story began to spread, whispers first, then full-fledged reports among courthouse staff. A police officer had hit a woman in court. No one yet realized that the woman he struck was about to become the highest ranking law enforcement official in the city. In his holding cell, Rourke sat alone, staring at the wall. His badge, once a symbol of honor, was gone. The echo of the slap haunted him, reverberating in his memory like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. He told himself it had been a misunderstanding, that she had provoked him, but deep down he knew better. It wasn't about her words. It was about his pride, his need to assert authority in a world where he felt it slipping away. Outside, the courthouse lights dimmed. Maya stepped into the cool evening air, her cheeks still faintly red. She took a deep breath, her thoughts steady and deliberate. Tomorrow, she would stand before the same department that had produced Officer Daniel Rourke. And tomorrow, they would all learn who she was and what she stood for. The following morning arrived with a quiet chill that matched the heaviness in Officer Daniel Rourke's chest. He had barely slept. The sterile walls of the temporary holding room felt more like judgment than confinement. The events of the previous day played in his mind on a merciless loop: the courtroom, the slap, the shocked silence that followed. His reputation, his career, maybe even his freedom, all of it hung in limbo. For a man who had spent 2 decades wearing the badge with pride, the fall from grace felt both swift and absolute. Captain Morales entered just after sunrise. He stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking, his face grave. "You've been released pending internal review," he said. "Turn in your equipment." "The chief wants a word with you this afternoon," Rourke blinked. "The chief?" "Yeah," Morales muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "The new one. She officially takes command today." The word new barely registered. Rourke nodded numbly. He had heard rumors for weeks. A new appointment from the mayor's office, a leader focused on reform and rebuilding community trust. He had imagined someone bureaucratic, someone who didn't understand what it was like to be on the streets, the kind of person who preached about empathy from behind a desk. He wasn't in the mood to hear it. When Morales left, Rourke gathered his few personal items: a coffee mug, a photo of his late partner, the worn leather notebook where he scribbled details from cases. As he left the precinct locker room, whispers followed him like shadows. Some officers looked away. Others couldn't hide their judgment. Everyone had heard. A cop striking a civilian in open court was scandal enough, but to do it on the eve of a leadership transition made it headline material by noon. The city's news outlets were already buzzing. "Officer suspended after courtroom altercation," one headline read. Rourke avoided looking at his phone. He didn't need to see the public outrage to know it existed. At 1 o'clock sharp, he was told to report to the conference room on the 12th floor, the same floor where the chief's office sat. The elevator ride felt endless. As the doors opened, he caught sight of the newly polished brass plaque that read, "Chief of Police, Dr. Maya Carter." For a moment, he froze. His throat went dry. The name hit him like a hammer, and the memory of her calm, steady gaze from the courtroom returned with brutal clarity. The woman he had struck wasn't just a civilian. She was his new commanding officer. He knocked once on the door. "Enter," came her voice. She was standing by the window when he stepped in, sunlight outlining her silhouette against the skyline. The faint bruise on her cheek was visible, though mostly faded. She turned, her expression unreadable. Not anger, not pity, just quiet authority. "Officer Rourke," she said evenly. "Have a seat," he obeyed, lowering himself into the chair opposite her desk. His uniform looked suddenly too tight, his hands too large and clumsy. "I imagine you know who I am now," she said. Double quotes, yes. "Ma'am?" His voice was hoarse. "Good. That will make this easier." She walked around the desk and leaned against it, arms folded. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Rourke swallowed hard. "Chief, I made a mistake. I lost my temper. It was unprofessional, and I take full responsibility." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that all?" He hesitated. "I thought you were what?" She interrupted, her tone sharp but controlled. "A spectator? Someone beneath your patience?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. "Let me tell you what I saw, officer," she continued. "I saw a man who has forgotten what his badge means. You were supposed to represent order, integrity, restraint. Instead, you let anger guide your hand. You struck a person who posed no threat to you. Do you understand how serious that is?" Rourke nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "Yes, Chief." Maya exhaled slowly, as if steadying herself. "You're not the first officer I've seen lose control. But you may be the first to do it in a courtroom, in front of a judge, and in front of your peers. The consequences will be severe. The question is whether this moment destroys you or teaches you." Her words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. "I've read your file," she went on. 20 years of service, commendations, a record of bravery. You've done good work, Officer Rourke, but somewhere along the line, you've stopped seeing people as people. You started seeing them as problems to control. That's not policing. That's fear." Rourke's jaw tightened. "With respect, Chief, you don't know what it's like out there. You haven't been in the streets when someone's reaching for a gun, when backup's 5 minutes away." "I do know," she interrupted quietly. "I've been in those same streets. I've worn the same vest. The difference is, I never let fear justify disrespect." The room went silent. Maya studied him for a long moment. then sat behind her desk. Internal affairs will handle the disciplinary side. Legally, the court may press charges. But before any of that moves forward, I want to understand something. Why did you react the way you did yesterday? Not the surface reason, the real one. Rourke rubbed his hands together. He wanted to say it was a misunderstanding, that she'd challenged his authority, that the courtroom tension got to him. But as he met her gaze, those excuses withered. I was angry, he admitted finally. Not at you. At everything. The system. The disrespect we get out there. The feeling that no one sees what we sacrifice. You said one thing, and I snapped. She nodded slowly. Anger is human, but unchecked, it's dangerous, especially in someone with power. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I'm not going to end your career today, she said at last. But you are suspended without pay, pending review. And if you want any future here, you'll undergo mandatory counseling and training in de-escalation. You'll also spend 6 months working in community outreach under direct supervision. No patrol, no weapon. Rourke looked up, startled. Community outreach? Yes, she said. You'll sit with the people you claim to protect. You'll listen to their stories, their anger, their pain. Maybe then you'll understand what law enforcement really means. He nodded slowly. It wasn't the punishment he'd expected. It was worse in some ways. But beneath the humiliation, there was a flicker of something else. Relief. A second chance. Maya stood, signaling the meeting was over. You can go, officer. Report to Captain Morales tomorrow morning. And Rourke, he paused at the door. Next time you raise your hand, she said softly, make sure it's to help, not to harm. He nodded once and left without a word. The weeks that followed were humbling. Rourke reported to the Community Outreach Division, a modest office tucked behind the main precinct. His new assignment involved meeting with youth programs, mediating neighborhood complaints, and sitting in town halls where citizens voiced their frustrations. At first, it was torture. He endured verbal attacks, skepticism, and distrust. People saw him as a symbol of everything wrong with policing, but slowly something shifted. He began to listen, really listen. He heard mothers describe the fear of traffic stops. Teenagers talk about being profiled. Elders recount the erosion of trust that once bound communities to officers. Each story cut through his armor of defensiveness. He started to see faces where he had once seen threats. One afternoon, months later, he found himself at a community event organized by Chief Carter herself. She spoke to the crowd about change, accountability, and partnership. When their eyes met briefly across the room, there was no anger in hers, only quiet acknowledgement. After the event, he approached her. Chief, he said simply. Thank you. For what? She asked. For not giving up on me. She gave a small, knowing smile. You gave yourself the chance, officer. I just held the mirror. Rourke nodded, his expression solemn. I've been doing the work. I see things differently now. I thought strength meant control. Turns out, it means restraint. That's the beginning of wisdom, she said gently. Keep going. As he walked away, the air felt lighter. He still bore the weight of what he had done, but it no longer defined him. It had become his lesson, his reckoning. In the months that followed, under Chief Carter's leadership, the department began to change, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. Training programs expanded, community dialogues deepened, and officers began to see their roles not just as enforcers of law, but as guardians of humanity. And for Daniel Rourke, each day became an act of quiet redemption, a chance to rebuild what anger had broken. Because sometimes, the greatest justice is not in punishment, but in transformation.